I rented a room, and my neighbors started treating me like a criminal. That's exactly how the nightmare started. And honestly, I still get chills when I say it out loud. Because if someone told me a year ago that a simple decision, renting a cheap room in a nice house, would throw me into one of the most unsettling situations of my life, I would have laughed it off. But the truth is, I had no idea what kind of mess I was stepping into. And the worst part, everyone around me knew something. Something I didn't. Something they refused to tell me. When I first walked into that house, everything looked completely normal. A little old, sure. Slightly worn carpets, a weird creak on the staircase, that faint smell of something like dust mixed with old wood. But it felt lived in, not creepy. The landlord, a middle-aged guy named Carl, talked fast, didn't look me in the eye too much. But hey, cheap rent makes you overlook things. He told me the other tenants mostly kept to themselves, worked odd hours, and didn't like too much noise. Honestly, that sounded perfect for me. I just needed a base somewhere quiet, somewhere affordable, somewhere I could reset my life after a long, messy breakup and moving out of my old apartment. But here's where the story starts to tilt sideways. The first moment I met the other tenants, something felt off. You know that feeling when you walk into a room and everyone stops talking for just a second too long? Like they were talking about you or about someone who used to stand exactly where you're standing? That was my first interaction with them. 3 people lived there. Emma, the girl across the hall, Lucas, the guy downstairs who barely spoke, and an older woman named Janet, who lived in the biggest room next to the kitchen. When I said hi, they didn't smile, they didn't introduce themselves, they didn't even nod. They just stared, cold, blank, sizing me up like I wasn't a new tenant, but a problem. At the time, I brushed it off. Maybe they were shy, maybe they weren't expecting someone new, maybe they'd all had a bad day. But now, looking back, no. They weren't surprised because I was new. They were surprised because I was replacing someone they wished they hadn't lost. Someone whose name nobody wanted to say. The first week passed quietly, almost too quietly. I barely crossed paths with them, and when I did, I'd get the same blank stare. No small talk, no how's it going, not even a polite smile. Just that same heavy, awkward silence. It was like living with 3 ghosts who hated the idea of being seen. But eventually, the weirdness started dripping in. The first thing that happened was small, but it stuck with me. I woke up one morning, went to the kitchen, and found the trash can completely empty. Like, spotless. The bag replaced, nothing inside, no smell, no crumbs, perfect. Except I had taken my trash out the night before. It wasn't full, it wasn't dirty, there was no reason for anyone to empty it. Then I noticed the fridge shelves had been rearranged, just slightly. My stuff was pushed to the side. Someone else's food lined up in neat rows like a grocery store display. Mine squeezed into the corner, like it wasn't welcome there. Again, small things, easy to rationalize. But when those small things keep happening over and over, you start connecting dots you don't want to connect. About 2 weeks in, I heard Emma talking on the phone at night. Her door was cracked open, just a little. And I wasn't trying to listen, but the tone in her voice stopped me. It wasn't the words, it was the fear. He's acting totally normal, she whispered. I know, but it freaks me out. What if he snaps again? Again? Who snapped? Did something happen here? And why did she sound scared of me? Before I could hear anything else, she must have noticed movement in the hallway because her door shut instantly. That was the first real moment I thought, something is wrong, and it involves me. The next sign came a few days later. I came home from work, tired, hungry, ready to crash. I grabbed a frozen pizza, opened the oven, and froze. Because there was something inside. Not food, not a pan. It was a small, folded note, placed dead center on the oven rack. It said, "We don't want any trouble." Nothing else. No name, no explanation. Just that message, like a warning, like a threat, like someone thought I was about to do something terrible. I showed it to Carl, the landlord, but he shrugged and said the tenants get nervous sometimes and that I shouldn't take it personally. He brushed it off like it was no big deal, like he'd seen it before. That made it even worse. Now at this point, if you're watching this, you're probably thinking, dude, why didn't you move out? And trust me, I thought about it. But life isn't that simple. I had just paid first month's rent plus deposit. I was broke, I had nowhere else to go. And also, I really didn't understand the situation yet. I thought maybe they were just socially weird. Maybe the last guy had caused problems. Maybe it wasn't about me. But then the house started to change. I began hearing noises at night. Slow footsteps outside my door, the soft creak of the staircase when nobody was supposed to be awake, whispering I couldn't hear the words, just the tone. Sometimes urgent, sometimes scared, sometimes angry. Every time I opened my door, the hallway was empty. And then there were the locks. One night, I tried to leave my room around midnight to get a glass of water. The doorknob turned, but the door wouldn't open. At first, I thought it was stuck. Old wood, old house, things jam sometimes. But when I pulled harder, I heard it. A click. From the outside, someone had locked me in. I panicked, banged on the door, pulled it so hard the frame shook, and then it clicked again. Unlocked, like someone had been standing right outside, listening for my reaction. When I yanked the door open, the hallway was dark, totally empty, silent. I barely slept that night, and that's when things finally blew up. One morning, I walked into the kitchen and found all 3 tenants sitting at the table. They never sat together. They never even ate at the same time. But there they were, staring at me like they'd been waiting. No greetings, no small talk, just silence thick enough to choke on. Then Janet spoke. "You're not going to do what he did, right?" Her voice was calm, dead calm. The type of calm that hides something dark underneath. I asked, "What do you mean? Do what? Who did?" But before she could answer, Lucas muttered something under his breath. "Don't play dumb." That sentence locked into my brain like teeth. I told them I had no idea what they were talking about, but they didn't believe me. Emma's eyes were wet, like she was holding back tears she didn't want to explain. Lucas just stared at me like I was a ticking bomb. Janet looked disappointed in a way that didn't make sense. I asked again, "What happened here? Who lived in my room before me?" Emma stood up so fast her chair scraped across the floor. "We're not doing this," she said. "Not again." And she left. The others followed. And that's when things stopped being weird and turned threatening. The next morning, there was a second note. This time taped to my door. Bigger, bolder letters. No subtlety. "Don't make us call the cops." My stomach dropped. Call the cops for what? What did they think I was going to do? Or worse, what did the previous tenant do that made them terrified of anyone living in my room? I needed answers. So I went to Carl again. This time I didn't mince words. I demanded he tell me what the hell happened before I moved in. And for the first time since I met him, he stopped looking annoyed and started looking scared. He told me the previous tenant was a guy my age named Marcus. At first, he was normal, quiet, respectful, like me. But over time, he changed. Started yelling at night, started accusing the neighbors of watching him, started locking his door, started leaving threatening messages around the house. Eventually, things escalated. Something happened. Carl wouldn't tell me what, but the police got involved. And then, Carl said something that made my blood run cold. They told me he wasn't dangerous, until he was. As the blue, I asked him what Marcus did, but he wouldn't say. He just looked at me with a mix of guilt and fear and said, "You're not him. Just don't act like him. Don't make them nervous." So now the pieces started to click together, at least from their perspective. They weren't weird because of me. They were scared because someone like me had lived here before. Someone who flipped out. Someone who scared them so badly that even now, months later, they still jumped at shadows. But that explanation didn't settle things. It only made it creepier. Because if Marcus moved out, why did the police say, "until he was"? What did he do? And where was he now? And then, one night, I got the answer. I woke up to a scratching sound. Not on my door, on my window. Soft at first, like someone dragging a finger across the glass. But then it got louder, more desperate, more frantic. I pulled the curtain aside, and Marcus was standing outside. He looked wild, thin, eyes sunken, clothes ripped, like he hadn't slept in days, and he stared at me like he was staring at a mirror. "I lived here first," he whispered. "It's still my room." My heart froze. I didn't know whether to scream, run, or slam the window shut, but he kept talking fast, shaking, frantic. "They made me crazy. They did things at night, whispered about me, locked me in. They're doing it to you too, aren't they?" Everything inside me twisted, because some of the stuff he said lined up. But then he said, "They want you to snap. That's the game. They pick someone, they push and push until they break. Then they blame you." His voice cracked. "They made me the villain. Don't let them do it to you." Before I could respond, the backyard light turned on and the 3 tenants ran outside. Not scared, not shocked, prepared, as if they had been waiting. Marcus bolted. They chased him. Someone screamed. Someone fell. I heard a struggle, heard shouting, heard something break, but I couldn't see through the window anymore. I called the police. By the time officers arrived, Marcus was gone. The tenants said he attacked them. They said he came back to threaten the new guy. They said they feared for their lives. But something in their story didn't add up. Actually, nothing added up. Because later that night, I found something under my bed. A small wooden box. Inside notes. Dozens of them, all in different handwriting. Some angry, some scared, some pleading, all directed at Marcus. But the handwriting matched the notes left for me, which means they started doing the same things to me that they once did to him. The rearranging, the locked door, the whispering, the accusations, the fear, the pressure, and suddenly, everything Marcus said made sense. This wasn't paranoia. This was a pattern, a cycle, a game, a sick way for them to control whoever lived in that room until the person snapped. I moved out the next morning. I didn't argue. I didn't pack neatly. I didn't even tell them. I just grabbed what I could and left. And the last thing I saw as I walked out the door, Emma watching me from the top of the stairs, not angry, not relieved, just disappointed, as if I had ruined something for them, as if I wasn't the ending they wanted. Even now, I sometimes wonder if Marcus was right. I wonder what they would have done if I had stayed long enough for them to finish whatever they started. I wonder how many people lived in that room before him, before me. I wonder if the landlord knows more than he admits. And worst of all, I wonder who lives there now, and how long it'll take before they start whispering about him too.